There are many podcasts out there that make fun of movies. It's not exactly the most original concept after all. However, I feel one podcast has managed to stand out from the rest, and that one is How Did This Get Made? The premise is a simple one, as three comedians and an occasional guest join together to watch an infamous bad movie and make jokes about it. However, the reason I like How Did This Get Made is because said comedians are not just a bunch of jokesters who don't know what they're talking about. Paul Scheer, June Diane Raphael, and Jason Mantzoukas have worked on many movies and television shows and actually have knowledge about the filmmaking process, which provides a refreshing insight when commenting on a bad movie. The humor thus comes not from insulting the people who worked on the film, but rather trying to understand the bizarre creative decisions. How Did This Get Made primarily sticks with infamous movies like Battlefield Earth and Howard the Duck, but the hosts still find new creative ways to talk about them. Scheer will often provide background information on the production, while the other hosts provide their opinions and reactions to what they just watched. These are people who know about the hard work that goes into any movie, and that nobody sets out to make a bad one. That gives the show a bit more of a laid-back quality, as they never come across as being unnecessarily mean or cruel towards those who work hard on them. They recently did an episode on Master of Disguise, and while a lot of the podcast was spent making fun of the comedy and the attempts at humor, they also talked a lot about what they admire about Dana Carvey and the high opinion of him and his work. Some people might accuse them of going soft on their targets, but I actually think How Did This Get Made proves you can comment, give opinions, and make jokes about movies of dubious quality without acting like a jerk. The hosts are able to straddle that line of making mocking remarks and rarely feel like they're hurting anyone. Jason Mantzoukas is especially a master at this. Too many people, when they make fun of bad movies, create this narrative that they're taking revenge. How Did This Get Made doesn't do that. Instead, there's a proper comedic dissection of why things might have gone astray in the finished film. Sometimes they'll even bring in someone who worked on the film. For the episode on Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, they called Matthew Berry, one of the credited writers on the movie. His story about working with Paul Hogan and him and his co-writers' experience coming up with jokes and dealing with Hogan's demands and requirements is really funny and entertaining. Very often they'll have a guest, and that allows the episodes to avoid too much repetition. One of my favorite guest spots was when Paul F. Tompkins appeared to talk about Lake Placid. Tompkins reacting in shock that famed television writer David E. Kelley writes his drafts with yellow legal pads might be one of the funniest moments on the show. Other fun guest appearances include Kevin Smith on the Wild Wild West episode, Kristen Schaal on the Howard the Duck episode, and Natasha Lyonne on Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. I'll actually be surprised sometimes at the selections they have gone with. I remember seeing the romantic comedy Little Italy and thinking what a perfect movie it was for How Did This Get Made. But I assumed there was little chance they would cover the movie, as it was a little-seen Canadian comedy that only got a VOD release in the United States. However, much to my shock, they devoted an episode to Little Italy, and it was hilarious. I also did not expect an episode on the 1996 adaptation of The Adventures of Pinocchio starring Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I have not watched it in years, but I remember it being disturbing. Them describing the movie's events certainly brought back memories of nightmare fuel. According to Scheer, he occasionally watches the movies by himself or with Raphael, while Mantzoukas will view the movies separately. They then only reveal their opinions when they sit down to record the show, and that leads to a fun, spontaneous feeling to the episodes. One highlight is the episode for The Odd Life of Timothy Green. Scheer and Raphael saw the film first and found it the right fit for How Did This Get Made, and then Mantzoukas surprised them by revealing how much he loved it. That led to a spirited discussion about the themes of the film and allowed that episode to stand out from others. They will also go into funny tangents that often have little to do with the movie they're discussing, but are still hilarious. One that always stands out to me is when June Diane Raphael revealed her father once thought Cillian Murphy was her in the Masters of the Universe episode. and now I can no longer look at Cillian Murphy the same way. A recurring segment on How Did This Get Made is Second Opinions, in which Scheer reads 5-star reviews of the movie taken from Amazon. Some of the selections are obviously joke reviews, while others will be sincere and genuine praise. They will also tour the podcast and produce live shows with an audience. I admit I prefer the in-studio ones, they are a bit more controlled. However, a few nuggets will come from the audience interactions. For the Space Jam episode, they specifically chose to record it in Chicago, where Michael Jordan is revered. Having these newcomers to this blatant 90s commercial respond live to the generation with a nostalgic fondness for Space Jam leads to some really funny moments. And The Adventures of Pinocchio had an audience member explain just how dark and twisted the original Carlo Collodi story is. Something that adds to the fun of the podcast is watching the movie and then listening to the episode afterwards with the film still fresh in your memory. I did that with the Village People musical Can't Stop the Music, and it made the episode even funnier. There's a common misconception that I don't like when movies are criticized, and that's incorrect. I have nothing against movies being criticized or made fun of. What I don't like is when people use movies they dislike as an excuse to bash and insult the talent who made them and to tout their own superiority. I like How Did This Get Made because it does not fall into that trap. Scheer, Rayfield, and Mantzoukas have said they don't do the podcast to bring other people down. They do it out of a love and wonderment for movies. It's just a bunch of comedians coming together and having a goofy conversation about what they just watched. If you have not listened to How Did This Get Made yet, I highly recommend it. There are a bunch of episodes available here on YouTube and on the Earwolf website, and they will often rotate classic episodes in and out, so you will always find something worthwhile to listen to. See you next time.